Hello, everybody. I'm Eliza Bailey. I'm very happy that you've joined us today for this Pure webinar, part of our Pure Live Experiences series. A lot of you might recognize me. I've been at Pure for about 8 years now, formerly as marketing manager, and now I look after the journalists that come to the show. We're very lucky to have such fantastic journalists that come to Pure because of all the small independent properties that are at Pure and all the wonderful stories that as a result of all those small off the beaten track gems. I'm very happy that we're going to be talking today to Daisy, who, in addition to being a great personal friend of mine, is also a really good friend of Pure. She's been coming for years as well. She is founder of Bird Travel PR, which as a firm has a kind of very similar ethos to Pure. She looks after a lot of independent, sort of off the beaten track properties with, with a lot of integrity, very sustainable and really interesting stories. So, she's always been a very good friend to us. Her firm, in addition to doing traditional PR, now encompasses, like many PR firms, so a very broad spectrum of skills such as kind of brand guardianship, creative consultancy, social media strategy, ambassador projects, things like that. I think what we want to do today, I think we want to keep it quite kind of informal and more kind of conversational. So please send questions. There's a Q&A button just underneath. So hope you'll get through some of those. But I think what we're wanting to do is sort of just generally chat about the kind of the state of media and PR at the moment. What purists, both kind of exhibitors and buyers, can be doing at the moment to kind of make the most of some of the downtime that they will be having, and what opportunities this crisis may present. I mean, it's been very tough for the travel industry, obviously, but we want to try and alleviate that and hopefully give some very tangible takeaways which can help purists. So, hello Daisy, are you there? Ah, great. Okay, well, so to kick things off, I would like to ask, and it's a pretty tough question. Well, obviously, Pure's a global show, so consumers, all stages of the world are at very different stages of this crisis. But I know one of the things that you do for your clients is kind of gauge consumer sentiment and kind of let them know, what's happening in the world. How do you feel consumers are feeling about travel at the moment?
Well, firstly, thanks for the warm welcome. Lovely to be here. It's a tricky one. Obviously, there is anxiety. Obviously, individual situations vary, person to person, place to place, and people are going through different hardships. So I wouldn't want to generalize. However, we are in a digital age, so brands can ask their communities in real time, what they're interested in, how they want to travel, how they're feeling. Similarly with media, the newspapers online, there's a huge amount of commentary off the back of every single article. So I think we're in a situation today where it's much easier to get a gauge on how people are feeling. We've been, obviously I'm calling in from London. We look after clients all over the world and we take a very global outlook, but I am sitting in London. I have been in lockdown in London. So I'm coming from a mainly UK-centric perspective, but we have colleagues all over the world. And but what I'm hearing here, things are changing day by day, week by week. I've spoken to a lot of our clients this week, a lot of our tour operator friends, and it's really encouraging to feel that there is an optimism, and there is definitely, whilst there is a lot of uncertainty still, there is, there's definitely, what is absolutely certain is an eagerness to travel. I don't think you can deny that most people, there's a real hunger to travel, and escapism is at an all-time high. So, I am hearing from some of our tour operator friends from, I see the A&K are getting uplift in inquiries, and interesting to see where, places as far-flung, Brits traveling to Africa, a big focus on privacy, on villas, on private boats and yachts, and then also the Indian Ocean. I know that Scott Dunn are seeing a big, relative to the situation, inquiries coming through for places, for real escapism. People are in different situations under their lockdown, And so I think there's an intention and an eagerness to travel. And I think what's absolutely certain is that we've been in this extended sort of research and inspiration dreamer stage. So I think I'm hearing from a lot of people in sales that online research for planning travels and going onto tour operator websites is at a high, and people are browsing for longer. They might not be booking, they might not be putting down money, but the intention and the eagerness is absolutely there, which is encouraging. Some great.
And I think probably purists are pretty well placed to, you keep hearing that people are wanting more kind of getting back to nature, more kind of bucket list experiences, which are just the kind of experiences that come to Pure. So I presume as a community, Pure's pretty well placed to make the most of that return to travel.
100%. I think you're absolutely right. You know, what I've always loved the most about Pure is bringing together this community of who could have been unsung heroes, you know, really beautiful boutique lodges and safari camps or tiny little places off the beaten track that without a platform like Pure might not have the global sort of recognition. And, you know, I think now their values are more relevant than ever. I think, you know, I'm more concerned for, you know, the mass market travel, the big hotels that rely on business travelers, on volume business. I think, you know, it's a really challenging time for our industry. There's no denying that. I think I think there will be positive outcomes, and it will show brands in their true colors when it comes to values, like how they're treating their customers and what they stand for. And you know, a lot of the Pure exhibitors and the buyers are very values driven. So I think there's a real opportunity for purists to really shine through with those values and optimize them.
Sure. So talking about opportunity, obviously, well, Pure, there are a lot of independents. You know, some have PR managers, some have big PR teams, some have absolutely none, some have PR firms, and some are kind of one-man band type organizations. So with sort of that in mind, what opportunities or what should people be doing during this crisis and during this downtime? You know, what opportunities are there for good PR at the moment, and what are people doing well and what are people doing wrong?
Well, it's a good question. I think if you look back to, you know, not another pandemic, because this is the first in our lifetime and hopefully the last. But if you look back to crises, to recessions, the brands who go into hibernation and you know, might panic or just not put any resource into marketing and communications, it's a lot tougher to get back on your feet. I do really sympathize and acknowledge that a lot of brands just don't have the resource right now. They're dealing with just it being in survival mode. So, you know, when I look at our clients, they're all in different situations in different countries. Some have got bigger marketing teams, some have got none. So we're being very adaptable. But I think now is the time to really take a hard look at your brand. You know, look at its DNA. Use this unexpected quiet time to you know, have, like people are doing at home under lockdown, having a bit of a spring clean. You know, really tidy up your brand. You know, make sure that you've got a really strong message, that it's relevant now, that your values are all crystal clear. And I think, as I said at the beginning, we are, you know, we have a great opportunity now that we live in such a digital age. You know, you can get a gauge of your online community's consumer sentiment, you know, in real time. You can turn around content plans quite quickly. You can switch things on and off. And just we can communicate. Look how all these businesses have reorganized via Zoom like we're doing now. So there are a lot of opportunities to get your message out there quite quickly, and just to change direction.
Yeah.
Adapt.
A stat that you told me when we had a conversation before, which I found really interesting, was that social media stats are up 30%, but this is the cheapest ever time to advertise on social media or promote your post. So that sounds like a pretty great opportunity if you do have some budget.
Yes, for sure. I think you know, social media is extremely important right now, and you're right. The social media usage is at an all-time high as people are inside or at home. They're not traveling, they're not socializing, they're not out at events and parties and all the rest of it. So there is a real opportunity there. I think in terms of digital spend, marketing is definitely, there's very cost effective ways to spend a little bit of money now, which will go a long way. However, it needs to be appropriate and relevant. I wouldn't be advising anyone to go spending lots on PPC or digital advertising, but you can do some sensitive and subtle advertising, both in print and digital, at a very affordable cost right now. And actually, do you know what? Supporting media partners who've supported you for many, many years will go a long way. I think now is the time to, get personal, pick up the phone to people, send personal emails, don't do too much blanketing, leverage existing friendships and relationships. And that's the most wonderful thing about our industry, especially the Pure community, is that they're genuine friendships, peer-to-peer, even competitors. A lot of your brands have got real allies in the industry, in the media. So it's about really checking in on them as well, showing empathy. A lot of people are out of work and going through hardships. People are grounded who are used to traveling all the time. So I think connecting, checking in on people, collaborating is now important than ever, and you'll get a lot more longer term goodwill if you treat the media favorably and your industry partners.
Yeah, I think, there are a lot of, the media space is unrecognizable from when I started 8 years ago. And there are a lot more freelancers out there, and, some of them are incredibly prolific and just writing nonstop. And we have a lot of them at Pure, but, they're not that busy at the moment. So even, using them to write some of the content on your website or kind of update your brands, I think that's probably an opportunity as well for some of our purists.
Yes, absolutely. I think, some editors and journalists are busier than ever because there's less resource on staff. They are having to turn around content. They can't plan more than a day or two ahead. So it's, I'm sure they're working endlessly. And some freelancers who are, very news and trend driven and great at tapping into interesting thought leaders for commentary are working really, really hard. And I've heard that from a number of our journalist friends. But then others who are used to doing more long form articles that rely completely on press trips that they're not doing, that they are grounded. Those commissions are on ice. So there is a lot of talent out there to call on. And, a lot of my journalist friends are also excellent in turning their talent to writing for brands or doing social media content. And so, yeah, you're absolutely right. I think calling on some media talent to support you now would be a good idea.
We touched on sort of like the changing kind of landscape or temperature of, I think a lot of people have said that being kind is going a lot further. It's really lovely how people are collaborating, that former competitors are now kind of genuine friends. And Pure will be, the purists will be, well placed for that because they've always had a lot of integrity, Pure brands. So what other kind of new consumer trends do you anticipate after this crisis?
I think, the number one, and it's not the sexiest story for media to be writing about or for everyone to be throwing around social media and newsletters is health and sanitization and social distancing and part isolating when they're on holiday. As I said, it's not the most glamorous story and it's not what everyone needs to be writing about, but it is really important that those protocols are in place. And some travel providers are being more extreme than others and really talking about it. Some a bit too much. I'm not a fan of some quite terrifying looking videos that are flying around. But so I think health is the number one, on the agenda. But with that also wellness. So brands who are strong on wellness, really looking at how they can continue to offer spa and wellness within offering privacy as well. So sort of exclusive takeovers of wellness facilities, but then really repackaging, looking at what you've got, whether it's longevity or immune boosting. But number two, but I would actually put it also on a par, is privacy and nature. I think, as I said, everyone's in different situations in their lockdown experiences, and in lots of countries they're coming out of that. But I think there is definitely a new appreciation with nature and space, but alongside people's concerns over being in congested areas or big hotels, busy spaces, previously very congested tourist sites. So I think privacy is huge. I think people are going to want people with money to spend, and I think that's important to acknowledge that obviously Pure's audience are luxury travelers. Everyone's been hit financial, I'm sure, but I think during this period of lockdown, people have been reflecting on life, reevaluating how they live and consume and travel, and how they spend, their spending habits. But I think if we look at previous recessions, there is a lot of data that people, the audience that we're talking about, they're not willing to sacrifice their travel as much as other purchases. But I think, so back to privacy, I think a lot of your exhibitors are, they offer a lot of privacy, they offer a lot of space. They might be in the wilderness, in big expansive estates. They might be of a size that you can take over exclusively for extended family who haven't seen each other for a while, groups of friends. So I think exclusive takeovers, private villas attached to hotels, private boats, private jets, and yeah, I think nature and privacy are going to be huge, and that we're seeing from the tour operators. And I think.
Sorry, go on, Daisy.
My hope is that, and as you know, like all of our clients are very, they tend to have a lot of integrity and have got pretty robust sustainability processes in place, and often have their own foundations and are doing some genuine work for conservation and humanitarian causes. And my real hope is that people travel differently, and they're really much more, they might be traveling less, but they spend more time really considering where they're going and where their money's going, and really question intently their suppliers, whether it's the tour operators or the hotels, the lodges, the guides. Where's their spending going? Is it contributing to conservation and the rehabilitation of some of these communities that have been really, really struck by the lack of tourism? So that's my real hope, and I think we're seeing more of that, people just questioning more intently. Will take longer stays. If they're traveling less, they might take up residence in one place or do road trips, taking in multiple destinations. I know Scott Dunn, they are seeing inquiries for 3-4 week stays and sabbaticals. Maybe people are rethinking how they work, and now they've worked remotely. They can work anywhere over the world as a business owner or a leader. So I think longer stays and sabbaticals could be one. But I also think this pent up wanderlust and this extended inspiration period for research is, I hope these bucket list trips and these epic adventures rather than like endless short trips. So and a lot of your exhibitors really offer that, those real dream trips.
And what about, do you think that travelers are going to be younger? And do you think our purists need to pivot their marketing to try and encompass a younger traveler based on kind of health concerns?
It's a very good question. And I think this has been talked about a lot, especially, for the luxury audience that we've all been targeting all these years, who have, let's be honest, relied on the 60 plus empty nesters who've got the time on their hands, who are at higher risk now. And we don't know until we see how the virus unfolds and how the vaccine appears, and restrictions from country to country, we just don't know. So I think, yes, I think brands would be really smart to retarget to a more millennial mindset, who are going to be more willing and able to travel quickly and more adventurous in spirit. What we don't know is how the situation is going to adjust pricing. Airfares and a lot of hotels, lodges, flights are all going to be running at lower capacity, which increases price. So it is a challenge. I think we're all looking at. I don't know the answer, to be honest, but I think it's got to widen your targeting.
Yeah. Can we talk about, we mentioned that the media landscape is sort of unrecognizable from a decade ago. How are media, how are they adapting to the new normal? Like, what are they writing about? And a lot of purists are going to be thinking that like now might be the time to kind of reach out and seek stories. I personally don't want to read another article about armchair travel, pour a Negroni and watch the talented Mr. Ripley and you're in Tuscany. So, what is engaging travel content at the moment?
I think we've seen, I mean, firstly, we've got different media channels and different sectors. So there's newspapers who can turn around content pretty instantly, although they do schedule months and months ahead. So their calendars and their scheduling and their commissioning has been completely disrupted. But they are able to adapt quicker, and obviously newspapers are news driven. So we have seen a lot of very informative articles in the travel press. Unfortunately, we've seen sections shrink or disappear, both here and in the States and in Asia, which we hope will resume, and I'm confident they will do. But the newspapers have been very informative. I did hear that the Telegraph online audience is at an all-time high, especially the travel section, which I was very encouraged by. So clearly, I think they're doing something very right. I think they're being very informative, and it's a great resource. But yes, this armchair travel and virtual experiences, I think it's been great to keep that wanderlust alive. And I think some brands have been doing it really, really well, and others are kind of jumping on the bandwagon and not so well. We did see a lot of those sort of expert tips from barmen and interior designers and spa therapists. And I think it had a time and its place, but it got a bit exhausted. But I think now there's still a place for that, certainly when it comes to wildlife and nature, and just real epic trips. People are still wanting that level of escapism, especially as they've got time on their hands, they're researching their holidays. They're probably I think people will split. Those who've cancelled a number of trips and have the money to spend, they will splurge on a bigger trip. So they're going to take a lot longer to really consider and research those trips. The magazines, they plan a lot further ahead. But we saw Condé Nast Traveler able to turn around, adapt their content for the latest hot list issue quite quickly to be relevant. But we're seeing editors and travelers being really resourceful and doing retrospective stories. I'm liking the sort of return to quite nostalgic travel story, timeless sort of evergreen stories. And then there's a lot of, especially for your purist community, there's a lot of very, very interesting people within our industry who have great opinions from their destinations. We've been seeing quite a lot of nice sort of postcards from lockdown. I think the Sunday Times have coined it. They've had a nice column. Sort of we provided some content from the Galapagos, and they've been doing nice accounts of what lockdown's been like from different destinations, which they would have supported through travel.
Yes. In fact, I saw Glen Eagles did a series on kind of photos from their history. So actually, it's been quite a nice time for brands to, what's going to separate those who kind of sink or swim is how creative the ideas they come up with. And I'm really liking some of the creative ideas that some of the brands are coming up with in terms of kind of marketing and communications. Those kind of, like you said, nostalgic historical stories are great.
Exactly. I think the iconic hotels who have stood the test of time, and they've been through crises, they've been through, whether it's nothing at this scale, but they've been through recession, they've been through, some of our clients have been through world wars, and actually digging around in the archives and providing some commentary of how they've weathered these storms before. Obviously very different storms, but I think you're right, those iconic historical properties and brands just leveraging that history.
Yeah.
I think is
cool. And so for our purists, like how do you communicate these days? 20 years ago, it might have just been PR, like, sending your press release to the head of travel at the Telegraph. Do people still send press releases, or, what does communication mean today?
That's a big question, Liza.
For your firm, what touch points, it'll be social media, it'll be reaching out to journalists, it must be developing all the time.
Completely. And actually, interestingly, I've some conversations I've had this week from clients, but also tour operators. It is a quieter market. A lot of people within travel businesses or hotels or travel providers, they don't have the marketing resource, so they're not able to communicate. They don't have the talent in-house or the channels, and so they've gone into hibernation mode. which isn't what I'd recommend if you can find a way not to, because it is an opportunity to have a louder voice in a quieter market. And I'm hearing from some of those tour operators that there's a much higher open rate to newsletters. So I think, and I've seen some brands communicating really smartly with, just a softer approach, with, with kindness, with integrity, being really transparent, acknowledging that their customers are going through hardships, they've had holidays cancelled, they might be going through tragedy or grief or illness themselves. So it's a much, I think it's a much softer tone, but it's an opportunity to really shine with strong values. I think brands with integrity, with customer loyalty, and with strong values will survive this and have a lot of longer term goodwill from their customers or their media or their industry partners. In terms of blanketing, we haven't been doing too many press releases. I think unless it's data driven, you've got really strong facts and figures and data and survey results, then great. I think news for longer term, the magazines do work 6-12 months ahead, and we are thankfully, the beginning of the crisis, it was very challenging because I think everyone was just working in travel editorial, travel PR, marketing, operations, everything was turned upside down and people were having to really adapt and pivot. I'm really encouraged that now people are wanting to, they're wanting to talk about 21. They're wanting to talk about, escapism for next year. I think the message is different. What they're after is a bit different. I think there's a return to just more meaningful travel, making your trips count, choosing your providers wisely. So, I'm encouraged that we're talking to editors about commissioning stories for next year. They're wanting to hear about news and openings next year. I think there's a move away from the sort of faceless brands and the mass market travel, busy city breaks. And it's actually those things we've referred to, it's wilderness and nature and privacy and connection.
And what about talking about integrity and influencers? I mean, I'm sure there are a lot of influencers with integrity, but do you think that their role will change going forward? I know that previously, for a variety of reasons, which I won't go into now, we haven't had so many at Pure, though we have had one or two over the years. But they've had a huge hold on the market the past few years and have been able to, ask for huge amounts to go and stay at a hotel and take pictures and distribute. Do you see their role? Are they here to stay?
We work with influencers a lot, but we are very thorough with how we work with them and how we vet them and it's a very different relationship. It's a different conversation that you'd have with a journalist. I was thinking about this last night, and I was thinking back to 2008, 2009, post-recession, during the recession, and how that really impacted the pool of journalists we worked with. Back then, Twitter was around, Facebook we all started to use personally, but digital media, social media, influencers, bloggers were just sort of creeping in, but it wasn't a priority for me working in luxury travel. But what we did see during that recession is, I remember in the lead up to that period, the travel editorial publishing media was just exploding, and travel journalism was just the most aspirational job. And there were so many. I remember our databases were just so huge. And what that recession did was filter out those who, they weren't working with integrity, or they weren't writing that intelligently. They weren't real experts in their field. And they didn't really survive in travel journalism. And I feel like with influencers, we could see something similar, that, they've got to, bragging rights is going to be very distasteful right now. Just bragging for the sake of it, and that, nonchalance of jumping on a plane and bragging about this fabulous hotel or this expensive this or that. I think it's going to be quite out of fashion. We work with a lot of influencers who are intelligent, who are really smart when it comes to content strategy and marketing. And we really pick people who have the right profile and values. And it's for us working often with boutique hotels in interesting places, where each trip takes a lot of money and time to organize. We can only work with a handful. So they've got to have the right profile. I'm hoping that we're going to see those with real integrity and values, and who are smart and who can act as proper ambassadors to those brands, not just content creators. They've got an offline network that's as valuable to that brand than, you know, their digital network. So it's almost a return to ambassadors and tastemakers rather than just a numbers game where you're looking at digital influencers for how many followers they've got.
Sure. So I know you've spoken at Matter in the past, and, you know, we always focus on trying to have very tangible takeaways that people can kind of start doing today or tomorrow that will really try and make a difference to their business. Do you have, and it's another tough question, I mean, what can purists be doing now to prepare for coming out of this crisis?
I think using this time wisely to, as you said, sort of tidy up your brand. Is it that you need to do a really ruthless audit of your content? You know, how are you communicating your brand on your website? Can you be reviewing your blog content? Is it relevant right now? Do you need to bank some content to be publishing when it feels appropriate to do so? You know, I think in our industry, we're all, you know, it's very fast paced, especially if you're a seasonal hotel. You know, in season is when you're going to create beautiful content, but is when you're operating and really very busy. You know, I think sometimes with small properties and independent hotels with less resource, marketing isn't often a priority purely based on time and resource. So I would advise using this time to, you know, audit your content. If you need to ask for help from an expert editor or writer or content creator, then I think people have got time on their hands. And I wanted to support brands they love in an industry that is very dear to them. Again, social media, I think, you know, it would be a mistake to go quiet. You've got to be sensitive. It's got to be appropriate. Don't be pushy. Don't be too salesy. It's you know, using assets like nature and heritage and personalities, and it's that kind of storytelling.
I think, for me, like what Pure has, one of the reasons that journalists love it so much is there are so many great leaders and like visionaries in Pure, and they make such a better story than just a brand, you know, having why they came up with this brand. I mean, we always say at Pure, you know, they don't talk about what's in the box, it's all what's outside the box. They barely even mention their hotel. It's the whole why they came up with the hotel, what they want the hotel to do. And so maybe this is an opportunity for our purists to kind of position their leader or, you know, their kind of chief storyteller, you know, to media, or perhaps just as a kind of opinion pieces.
Yeah, 100%. I think you're absolutely right. And, you know, my real passion is working with private owner-operated properties and travel brands, and working with just very inspiring visionaries and leaders. And, you know, they are the biggest assets. A lot of your Pure gang, you know, they're, you know, I love the kind of maverick hoteliers and sort of accidental travel professionals that I meet at the show. And, you know, and they're real characters. They're often quite outspoken or opinionated. They might not have grown up. They're not career hoteliers who are sort of scripted. They're real characters that they've got interesting pasts that aren't just travel industry. So yeah, I think pushing your leader forward to be the voice of your brand, of your destination. I think collaboration, we've seen that done really beautifully in Sri Lanka, which is a destination which has been through no end of crises with, you know, civil war, and then last year's terrorist attack, and then this year it sort of broke my heart when, you know, three so quickly. But what we've seen out there is a great example of collaboration. We work with Resplendent Ceylon out there, and Malik Fernando, the founder, he was very quick after last year's crisis to gather with other hoteliers and industry leaders within Sri Lanka, knowing that the private sector needed to take the lead here and be a stronger voice collaboratively. So, you know, working with peers, but also competitors. And I think that's really sensible now, especially in these more emerging destinations, which don't have the resource, who don't have really smart, proactive tourist boards. You need to take matters into your own hands and join forces. And I think that's a lovely thing that's always happened at Pure, with people, you know, connecting with competitors or peers.
Yes, we find Pure, of all our shows, well, it's very collaborative. Everyone kind of wants to help each other. That's, you know, everyone, there's no sort of sense of competition. It's you know, Pure's really one of my favorite events. I've got a few questions for you, Daisy. Maybe I'll ask you these, and then did you want to mention anything else before we move on to questions from the audience? And can I also ask all of our viewers, if you've got a question, please put it in the Q&A box. So Daisy, did you have anything else that you think that's important that we touch on for purists?
I'm sure I'll chip in with some other things later on, but I'm happy to answer some questions.
Okay, I have, it's quite a specific question, and I know you don't really like me asking very specific things, but Ruth Gamper has said, what about travel to Italy? What will be the approach in experiencing Italy in the post-COVID-19 period? Yes, so sorry, Daisy, to put you on the spot with Italy, but what are your opinions there?
Well, it's interesting because only a month ago, you know, I would probably answer quite differently, and then other countries have followed suit, and you know, from where I'm sitting now. So, and Italy is opening up again for business. Hotels are starting to announce their reopening. You know, people love Italy. It's got the most legendary, iconic hotels in the world. It's got a culture and history and food and fabulous characters, and it's got so much, and that's never going to change. And I think you know, especially, I think it's a much loved destination, and that will stand strong. And I spoke to my colleague in New York last night, and she said that, sorry, that was my doorbell. Our colleague in New York said that some of her American travel industry contacts and journalists are wanting to write about Italy, because there's so much love for it. So yeah, I think it will stand strong. It'll take a time to recover, like a lot of destinations, but I think the mid to longer term is rosy.
Yeah, well, I know that it's ¡1 destination for Americans, so I know they'll be very keen to get back there soon. Some more questions. Alejandra Garcia says, besides shifting from group to more individual press visits and taking into account new health and safety norms, how do you foresee the dynamic of hosting, attending press trips changing?
I think I can't be too specific on that now, but I think definitely it's down to the individual journalists and their own risk assessment. I mean, we don't know yet how Brits are going to be able to travel. Only yesterday there was you know, more uncertainty on our quarantine and what that looks, and actually a bit more optimism that certain destinations you know, might be open to us sooner than we thought. I think with journalists, it's really down to it's their own risk assessment. But I think there's a lot that can happen in the absence of press trips. I think connecting with your journalist friends, you know, talking like we're doing here on Zoom, keeping those connections going, making sure that your story is being told, again, bringing your founder forward. I don't think we don't need to rely exclusively on press trips.
Sure. Actually, you just reminded me of something that I thought we should probably touch on. I know I sent you a video from an unnamed brand yesterday, which was a full 5 minutes on their health rundown before you even get to the check-in desk. I mean, certainly it looked like a holiday I never want to have. How can brands efficiently communicate their responsibility towards health without alienating their audience?
I think it's very important to prepare it, to have really thorough protocol written up well, to instill trust in your customers. I wouldn't be encouraging you to, unless it's really pioneering, because we have seen some very pioneering and very extreme measures that some travel providers and hotels are promising that they will introduce. And I think that's newsworthy and media want to know about it. But I think, you know, writing press releases and being proactive with newsletters and social media with endless health protocols, it is expected, certainly for luxury travel, it's expected that you as the travel provider, as the tour operator, you're going to do that legwork for the client, have it ready for them when they ask, but I don't think be proactive with it.
Sure. Actually, that leads on to a question that Louisa Davies has asked. She is presumably a buyer who attends Pure. She's saying that we are finding that some clients are still keen to travel now and are looking for us to guide them when they should travel, where is safe. Do you have any suggestions on how to communicate to clients to still inspire travel, but as responsible messaging? I mean, I suppose it's very difficult because we're not scientists or health experts, and, you know, so we don't want to tell people to, you know, how can you kind of hit a balance on inspiring but still kind of being responsible?
Yeah, good question. And I spoke to a number of tour operator friends over the past few days, and we had exactly the same conversation. You know, they're not scientists, they're not border controllers. I think it's about just being transparent and honest and keeping them updated day to day. helping them with the inspiration and the options of their travel, but not promising anything. I think we're not in a transactional place right now. I think being too heavy-handed when it comes to selling and taking a booking would be reckless, and could backfire in the longer term. I think now is the inspiration period, but I think it's all about keeping honest, regular, and transparent communications with your customers.
Yeah,
because you're right. We're not scientists.
George Cooper asks, who do you think will be the first demographic of tourists to get on a plane and travel? Will it be mass tourism, backpackers, or influential FTIs?
The luxury travelers, 100%. I think those with the money to spend will definitely, because they're the ones who will be able to, maybe rent a private villa or exclusively take over Kahanda Candy, or gather with friends and take a private safari camp. So I think the luxury travelers will be the first to rebound. I think the intention, the eagerness to travel out of millennials and younger travelers, they're less in the risk zone and they're more kind of intrepid. It's whether they have the money to travel. But I think it will be the luxury travelers who will be first to rebound.
We also have a question about when do you think luxury adventure travel will bounce back? I presume with adventure travel, because it's probably more isolated than others, there's probably quite a lot of opportunity for adventure travel. What do you think, Daisy?
I think it's all about access. We don't know about airlines restrictions and the measures they're putting in place. We don't know about airports. I spoke to a tour operator friend who was looking at maybe enhancing an airport experience to have less interaction. So that I can't comment on the airline, the aviation industry, or borders. So, but I think the intention and the appetite for adventure travel is probably at an all-time high. People wanting to connect with nature, to do something really meaningful, do a bigger trip. They might have cancelled a number of trips, so do more of a bucket list trip. So I think adventure travel, who knows when it will return, but I think there's a hunger for it for sure.
Sure. And this is a question from me. Have you seen brands which have done it, have been communicating really well? Are there any kind of brands that we can look up which you've seen, or clients of yours that you think have had a really strong PR strategy in the past couple of months?
Well, I mean, it's interesting you refer to it as PR, because I think our role is actually, we've always thought of ourselves as more kind of communicators, so crossing PR, marketing, communications. But in this period, we've had to exchange a lot of traditional PR with more marketing consultancy and content creation. So taking aside the more traditional channels, sorry, Eliza, you're going to have to repeat your question.
No, I just said, who's doing it well? Are there any good case studies that we can look up, or Instagram accounts that have just been inspiring to you that we can maybe copy?
Yeah, okay, sorry, I lost my train of thought. So in terms of newsletters, I tell you who I think's been doing well with newsletters, and they're not necessarily huge on the experiential travel radar, but Elegant Resorts have been doing some lovely communications in their customer newsletter. I just think they've hit a really lovely tone. I think on social media, our friends in Sri Lanka, Resplendent Ceylon, have been doing some lovely stuff with their rangers in Yala National Park, which has been, it's called the Jungle Chronicles. It's been feeding into kind of homeschooling. A lot of families trying to keep their children entertained and informed at home. I think Black Tomato have done some really cool stuff on social. I think something I haven't mentioned here, but I think is really important and has been covered quite widely, is how travel providers are using their assets and their networks as a force for good. So we've seen here in London, Claridge's opening up the hotel for NHS workers. Original Travel did a great initiative to treat NHS workers. I think a tiny hotel in Devon here has gathered hundreds of hotels around Europe for these NHS giveaways. Further afield, our friends in Ecuador, Metropolitan Touring, managed to raise 8 million within 5 days to support vulnerable communities and healthcare workers, to set up satellite medical facilities to the communities of Galapagos, who have been suffering hugely without any tourism in the Galapagos Islands. So I think travel as a force for good has been a very strong story that brands should really also to humanize their brand. I think it's important to shine those caring not just for their customers and their guests, but for their communities.
Yeah.
And environments.
I mean, certainly, well, obviously we have the We Are Africa travel show, and there have been parts of Africa which the conservation projects have really been affected by that money not coming in. What do you think about that?
I think it's huge. I think we've gone from a health crisis that we're still in, but to a conservation crisis. I think it's an interesting one because there's been a lot of backlash about travel and how travel contributes to our climate crisis. But now that everyone's grounded, what we're seeing is the importance of travel. That the industry is such a huge driver of the global economy and the global workforce, and how some destinations like Africa and places in South America and Asia who are so reliant on tourism. And there's a lot of these little eco businesses that, they don't have the government funding that some developed countries like where we're sitting have. They don't have any support at all. They're very low on resources, and so without tourism, they're not able to continue. And actually, it's been really inspiring to see some of the bigger tour operators like Abercrombie and Kent and their philanthropic arm, and also Journeys by Design. They set up the Africa Tourism Fund, so they're raising, I think, $5,000 funds for these small eco businesses on the ground in Africa who probably would not survive this. So yeah, it's hugely important, and there are ways to support conservation without traveling, and I think that's definitely been on the agenda for travel media to support as well.
Yes, in fact, I noticed the Royal Portfolio, another one of our clients, are selling bonds now so that they will still have a cash flow for their communities and their conservation projects, which travelers can then cash in at a later date, because it must be really devastating to have cash flow cut off entirely. Now, a couple of the questions that have come through, in fact, a few of them, they are about how can a brand, are people going to still want to travel with all these health checks, and how can PR or communications still communicate to kind of a positive travel experience with all the kind of health measures? Are people still going to want to travel? Well,
the feedback I'm getting from those on the front line when it comes to sales and receiving inquiries from tour operators and hotels, there are green shoots that they are getting inquiries. And what's been really surprising to me is the first question is not always talk me through the health measures and protocol. It's more about and these are inquiries for next year. So yes, there's anxiety over travel, but the intention and the eagerness is 100% there. Not for everyone. Sorry, I shouldn't say 100%, but I think there's definitely a hunger for it. I think that sort of dreamers phase and that willingness and desire for escapism is at an all-time high.
Sure. And we probably have time for one or two more questions. In the mid to long term, how do you think tourism will contribute to the fear mindset we're living due to COVID?
How do you think tourism is going to contribute to the mindset? It really depends on how each country responds, how each government, what measures they put in place to protect their people and travelers coming in and out. So I think we need to see how that unfolds.
Sure. And let me just have a look at another one. We've got quite a lot of questions coming in. Eric Deme of The Real Japan, he says, how do you think a country like Japan, for example, should promote itself post-COVID?
I think touching on a lot of the angles we spoke about earlier, it's personalities, characters, values, history, nature, wilderness, privacy. I think that there's lots of relevant angles there for Japan.
Yeah. Okay, well, Daisy, thank you so much. Do you think, have we touched on all points, or do you think there's anything else that we could cover?
I think there's probably lots more that we can cover,
Yeah.
but I've had enough of my
I mean,
voice.
would you be okay if people had a question which they weren't able to have answered, that if they email it to me or the Pure team, that we can communicate that to you and perhaps put you in touch?
Absolutely, yeah, very happy to answer any questions. And thank you so much for having me, Eliza, and for all of you for listening in.
Oh, no, we've really loved having you. Thank you so much, Daisy, and can't wait to see you at Pure next year.
Can't wait. Thanks, Eliza. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. So thank you very much, everybody, for tuning in. We have recorded this, so if you, well, it'll be on our social media feeds. As part of the Pure Live experiences, we're going to have another speaker in a couple of weeks. He's called Simon Court. It's going to be leading with conviction through the crises. He previously came on one of our Pure Pursuits as an expert, but he works as an advisor and a guide with senior leadership teams and executive boards. So he'll have a lot of strategy for your businesses. But thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to seeing you at Pure, if not before, next year. All right, bye.